Good morning, Milwaukie Lutheran Church. It's good to be seen by you all. I can't see you because this is a video recording. that was a bad joke, sorry. Um, Anyways, it's Sunday morning, but as usual, I'm recording this on Saturday. So I really hope that my canceling the service is justified and that there's actually snow on the ground tomorrow or today, whenever you're seeing this. It was a tough decision. To be fair, the whole snowstorm that started out wasn't supposed to happen. I think the forecasters had predicted maybe a couple inches that weren't going to stick, and we ended up getting like a foot. So who knows? Who knows what things are going to be like? Um, but regardless, I don't want folks risking themselves to get to church. I mean, not that you would. I think you all have a good sense of self-preservation. Mainly, I didn't want to be skating down Taylor's Ferry trying to get to the Selwood Bridge. It's all about me, folks. But yeah, this is hopefully going to be our one time for this year that we have to do this. So stay warm and stay safe. Also, you will have seen in the announcements that Linda is canceling her two events for this week. The two studies that she has on Monday and Tuesday. So same thing. And you will hear soon, probably Monday or Tuesday, about the Wednesday evening service. Although at this point, it's looking like we're probably going to have to cancel that one too, because it's going to essentially be snowing pretty much every night this week, and may or may not be sticking. But we're not making that call yet. You can expect to hear an update about that in the near future. But hey, according to the weather people, this is all supposed to be done by next Saturday. Fingers crossed, knock on wood. So here we are. It's great. Just a couple of announcements while I've got your attention. My big one is Synod Assembly is coming up, sort of. It's in May. May 20th, I believe, was the date, although I should probably check that before I ask people to sign up. But we're looking for 2 candidates who would be willing to participate. Here's the hook. It's virtual and it's only one day. So you don't really have to commit to driving anywhere or, a multiple day event. It's I think the last time we did this, it was like a 4-hour thing, like 8 to noon or 9 to 1, something like that. But it will only be dealing with business, so finance updates, and then if there's any memorials or resolutions that have been made, we'll vote on those. So if you're interested, talk to me or talk to one of our many council members, Jeff Jenks, Matt Millenbach, Mike Hagel, or Linda Seals are the executive team, and they'd be happy to point you in the right direction. Any registration fees, of course, would be covered by the church. So let us know if you're interested in that. I already mentioned Linda's stuff is canceled. We'll tell you about Wednesday when we cross that bridge. Adult Ed is postponed. I had thought about doing an online via Zoom, but honestly, the collaborative nature of the study that we're doing right now just doesn't do super well in a virtual environment. I'd rather have folks in a room together. And missing 1 week isn't going to kill us. So that's it. That's business. Yeah, that's it. So let's get moving on our sermon recording for today. I'm actually going to read the gospel text and then primarily be working with the Genesis text. So I'm going to read the gospel text first, and then I'll go back and read Genesis in that order. Okay, so our gospel text for this first Sunday of Lent, can you believe it? We're here. Is from Matthew chapter 4. Then Jesus was led up by the Spirit into the wilderness to be tempted by the devil. He fasted 40 days and 40 nights, and afterwards he was famished. The tempter came and said to him, "If you are the Son of God, command these stones to become loaves of bread." But he answered, "It is written, one does not live by bread alone, but by every word that comes from the mouth of God." Then the devil took him to the holy city and placed him on the pinnacle of the temple, saying to him, "If you are the Son of God, throw yourself down, for it is written, He will command His angels concerning you, and on their hands they will bear you up, so that you will not dash your foot against a stone." Jesus said to him, "Again it is written, 'Do not put the Lord your God to the test.'" And again the devil took him to a very high mountain and showed him all the kingdoms of the world and their splendor. And he said to him, "All these I will give you, if you will fall down and worship me." Jesus said to him, "Away with you, Satan, for it is written, 'Worship the Lord your God and serve only him.'" Then the devil left him, and suddenly the angels came and waited on him. The gospel of the Lord. Thanks be to God. Okay, let's jump back and read Genesis. So we're in Genesis, and this is one of those ones where they split it up into two little sections. So we're in Genesis chapter 2, and we're reading verses 15 through 17, and then we jump ahead to chapter 3, and we're reading verses 1 through 7. And I don't really know why they split this up, other than in the interest of, I guess, keeping it short. I don't know. Or else they don't want the whole rib extraction episode to be in there. I don't know. Not my decision, obviously. So again, we're in Genesis chapter 2, starting with verses 15 through 17, and then moving on to chapter 3, verses 1 through 7. "The Lord God took the man and put him in the garden of Eden to till it and keep it. And the Lord God commanded the man, 'You may eat freely of every tree of the garden, but of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil you shall not eat, for in the day that you eat of it, you shall die.'" Dun, dun, dun. And then jumping ahead to chapter 3. "Now the serpent was more crafty than any other wild animal that the Lord God had made. He said to the woman, 'Did God say, you shall not eat from any tree in the garden?' The woman said to the serpent, 'We may eat of the fruit of the trees in the garden, but God said, you shall not eat of the fruit of the tree that is in the middle of the garden, nor shall you touch it, or you shall die.' Dun, dun, dun. But the serpent said to the woman, 'You will not die, for God knows that when you eat of it, your eyes will be opened, and you will be like God, knowing good and evil.' So when the woman saw that the tree was good for food, and that it was a delight to the eyes, and that the tree was desired to make one wise, she took of its fruit and ate. And she also gave some to her husband, who was with her, and he ate. Then the eyes of both were opened, and they knew that they were naked, and they sewed fig leaves together and made loincloths for themselves." Da 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 da. I don't know why I'm making trumpet noises. This is what happens when I'm punching at home and recording sermons, and it's been a while since I've done this, so maybe I'm just out of the loop. Can I just say right up front that I'm super bummed? Says no one ever about not having to go to work. But, it seems like, not that this happens all the time, but I was really excited about this sermon. And, of course, the week that I'm really excited about my sermon is the week that we get, snow. But, the weeks where I'm like, I am totally uninspired and bored by this text, of course, the weather will be beautiful. That's just how it works. I had a bunch of great jokes, which I was really looking forward to having everybody laugh at, basking in the glow of congregational approval. And here I'll just have to imagine you laughing in my own brain. Sorry, I'm punchy. Okay, let's get on to it. So we've got two wonderful texts about the topic of temptation. Man, what a great and heavy word, right? So my opening question to you is, what does temptation? What role does temptation play in your lives? Does it play a role? Is temptation something that you struggle with on a regular basis? Obviously, I'm approaching this with myself in mind, with my bias, and I will admit that at least, from a more biblical perspective, I don't really struggle with temptation all that much, because honestly, I think a little bit of temptation is a good thing, right? When we talk about temptation, assuming that you don't struggle with profound temptation on a regular basis, generally, we're talking about the small temptations, like, I should probably not have more food, or, maybe I should have a fruit instead of that cookie, right? And I may be diminishing this a little bit. I mean, perhaps temptation comes in greater forms for us, but by and large, I don't know that we really struggle with it as much as our religious predecessors tend to think that we would. I mean, again, you go back in time, and I just get this feeling that a lot of our Christian predecessors really just imagined that the Christian life was struggling with the worldly temptations that abound, whereas in our context, I don't know that that's so much. So, it's a hard text. Well, both of these texts, in somewhat are hard to relate to because I don't know that we struggle with it. Um, but I think if we maybe reframed the question or reframed the idea of temptation, maybe we can find some points of accessibility. So let me put the question in a different way. How do you know what's good for you? And do you struggle to do the things that are good for you, right? And or do you do the things that might not necessarily be good for you? And I say this, I reframe the question in this way because I think in 2023 we struggle with that anxiety a lot more than anybody that came before us. And the reason I say this is because we know so much about things that are bad for us. And obviously, I'm kind of talking about this from the things that we put into our body standpoint. But if you just imagine, the list of commercials that might pop up in your typical television viewing cycle, how many of them are about, pharmaceuticals that are going to help improve your blood pressure or, lower your triglycerides or, whatever. Or, it's a commercial about something that's going to help you lose weight or get that fit body that has eluded you, get that nice six-pack, the toned abs. But the truth is we are very aware, hyper aware of the things that are bad for us. Sodium, bad. Fats, bad. Cholesterol, bad. Carcinogens, bad. Right? And the big question about carcinogens, is, well, which ones are they? What are the ones that we have to pay attention to? Sunlight, bad. I don't know if it's just because, Google has tracked that I'm turning 40, but now all of a sudden I see a bunch of ads that are popping up for skincare, right? Are you taking good care of your skin so that as I age, these crow's feet, which I'm already starting to get, they don't get so pronounced. Good thing I've got a decent head of hair, right? But think about it, right? I mean, we are hyper aware of the things that are bad for us. And I think one of the consequences of that is that when we think about, doing the things that are good for us, it can be a real struggle sometimes. And I think it can lead to some real anxiety about, am I being a healthy person? Am I doing the things that are good for my body? And also, I think it also, calls into question, which authorities do we trust? What voices are we listening to? I mean, should we really be trusting the advertisements on the TV? Whose interests are in mind there? Ours or, their shareholders? Coincidentally, I think, that the story from Genesis with Adam and Eve, I think it also reflects a similar thing going on here. I think that the narrative of Adam and Eve really is about knowing what's good for you and the dangers that lie therein. To be fair, this is a text that has really been misused, and I've preached on this text I think every year for the past several years. So I apologize if I'm repeating myself. If you haven't heard some of this stuff before, well, lucky you, right? But it's a text that really gets misused, especially when people tend to draw like this picture of humanity based on this, right? Like, here's the example of why the world is a bummer, because these two people messed it up, and we've all had to deal with the consequences. This is where we pull all this great stuff like original sin, etc. This is where, unfortunately, so many bad perspectives of women and the female gender have come from, at least from a Judeo-Christian perspective, right? It's Eve's fault. She's the one that gave in to temptation when the snake tempted her to eat from the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, and how much damage and harm has been done over the course of the existence of the Judeo-Christian ethic. How much harm has been done to women because of the basis of this text. I think it's a bunch of crud. Obviously, my biases. Additionally, I think that a reading of this text in that manner, trying to extrapolate some kind of overarching explanation of sin and brokenness and cosmology, I think it also does some other things which are really harmful, including portraying a very punitive God, right? Like, I told you not to do this, you did it. Because you did it, I'm gonna punish you. When in reality, I have often said that this text is a much better described as a depiction of the process of becoming human, of aging, of maturing, of learning to navigate the complexities of our world. Some of which involves knowing what's good for us, right? What are the things that are helpful versus harmful? But furthermore, the burden of knowing those things, right? I already elaborated as to how in 2023 it can be tough because we are so hyper aware of all the things that may or may not be bad for us. And to be fair, it's a shifting landscape too. One of the things which I was thinking to do was to turn the projector on and show you some of the ads from like the 1940s and the 1950s and even up through the 1960s, where you had professional athletes advertising cigarettes, right? Like, it opens up the lungs. I mean, our worldview, our understanding of the effects of tobacco and the carcinogens contained therein was so naive. And now, cigarettes, and rightly so, not to demonize anybody who enjoys the pastime of smoking, but we know that cigarettes are awful for us. Absolutely terrible. Smoking in all of its forms introduces things into your lungs, which, will impose free radicals into one of the most vital organs in your body, which, may or may not, create cancer cells, which ruins you. I mean, not to mention, COPD and all of these other related stuff. But at some point, we thought it was A-OK, not only A-OK, but even helpful to do that. But so now in the 21st century, as we become more and more aware, right, how many of us are looking at the labels on our different cleaning products to make sure that there isn't bad stuff in this? And I'm not saying this is a bad thing. Not at all. I mean, just take a look at what's going on in East Palestine, Ohio, for an example of, how it's better for us to know the bad effects of the chemicals and different substances that we encounter. But it's a lot. It's a lot to deal with. And consequently, we can, I think, also appreciate the burden and the responsibility of knowing what's good for us. What Adam and Eve are tempted with very much is that very responsibility. I mean, after all, the fruit that they're told not to eat, the fruit that they are quote unquote tempted with, is described as the knowledge of good and evil. And so often we kind of phrase that in an objective manner, like they know the difference between good and evil. But I think it's really about what's good for them, right? It's good as it relates to them individually, which is ironic and even tragic considering the nature of this, right? Eve arguably makes the decision that is counter to her own good, but for the sake of knowing her own good. And if this doesn't describe growing up, man, I don't know what is. I mean, Matt, think back to when you were younger, right? And all the things that looked shiny and fun, you were told not to touch or not to do or not to ingest, right? Um, but one of the things that parents of people and animals realize is that you can't really internalize the negative effects of something until you try it out, right? You can tell your kid, don't eat that, don't touch that, but they don't really realize the significance of it until they eat that or until they touch that. In a lot of ways, the role of parents or guardians is simply to reduce the consequences of the things that your child is inevitably going to expose themselves to. And I think, in a very real way, the same thing could be said of this text, is that we unfortunately have put God in this role of the punitive taskmaster who says, don't touch this, and then punishes them because they touch it. But I wonder if it's helpful to imagine God as the parent who's trying to shield their children from the worst of the consequences of the very real dangers that exist even in this idyllic world that they live in. And it's helpful again once you get we end at the very beginning of chapter 3, but once you move on past verse 7 and into verse 8, when you get the description of the consequences, this whole scene really rounds out for you. One of the things which I always point at is that the pain, the suffering, the toil which Eve is described to experience in childbirth is the same exact Hebrew word that's used to describe the pain and suffering that Adam, the earth being that we call Adam, experiences in working the ground. In other words, we've highlighted the differences in the consequences that happen to these two people, but the text goes to great lengths to show us the similarities, even for two very different people. And finally, we make a big deal about this snake character, and I've pointed this one out before, but this is it bears coming back to is the snake is described in the English translation as being crafty, and that really paints a picture for us of who this snake is and what evil things they're about to do. But the Hebrew word is arum, right? Well, when Adam and Eve are described as being naked, guess what the word is? Arum. Well, arumim, it's the plural in this case. But there is an intentional comparison that is drawn between the snake and humanity, and perhaps even a commentary on our own respective craftiness. And that nakedness is described after eating the apple. Well, it's not an apple. It is not an apple. And nowhere in the text does it say apple. But eating the fruit of the tree of knowledge of good and evil, is that suddenly we become naked, but also crafty, even though we were already naked, theoretically. But I wonder what it might mean to imagine the serpent as being crafty, yes, but also being naked, being exposed. Anyways, fun things to think about. But ultimately, and again, I think this passage is about what's good for us. Temptation is the struggle of doing the thing that is in our best interest, even though it might not be the most fun thing or the easiest thing. And so based on Genesis 2, I just want to throw out maybe a rubric that might be helpful in how we navigate this. And the great thing about this, too, is that it carries over into the Matthew text. Jesus, faced with his own temptation, I think follows a very kind of similar thing here. So when we're trying to navigate the world of what's good for us versus what's bad for us, I think there's essentially three things that we need to pay attention to. And the first one, obviously, is which authorities are we listening to? So in the Genesis text, this is extremely blatant. Which authorities did they listen to, right? So God, Yahweh, the divine, lays out, here are the things that you can eat, here are the things you should avoid. I, the authority, have told you this, and yet They listen to the very convenient voice on the side. And I think in that as well is, whose interest does the authority have? Is the authority telling you things because they have your best interest in mind, or because it benefits themselves? And we don't have to look too far into our own recent past to explore this. When COVID first reached our shores, to be fair, our authorities weren't entirely sure what to do. I mean, I don't know if you remember, but in the first couple of months, even they were saying, don't wear masks. You don't need them. Of course, it was later revealed that part of their motivation for that was so we didn't exhaust the as yet nascent mask supply. Had not reached full production yet. They wanted to reserve, especially the N95 masks, for healthcare workers and other frontline essential workers. But then as time went on, suddenly we have authorities stepping in, claiming, that masks are detrimental to you. And if you were to ask many of these folks what their justification was for not wanting to mask up, was it because they had your best interest in mind? Or did they have some personal justification? Did they have some personal opinion or vendetta or opinion, right? Same thing could be extrapolated with regards to vaccination mandates. But I would remind us all of a wonderful little medicine called ivermectin that was touted by many authorities as well. And at the end of the day, what were the motivations there? Was it really because, were people really recommending these things because they thought it was in the best interest of everybody, or because they themselves got personal benefit from it, or avoided responsibility, right? Avoided doing something they didn't want to do? Because temptation isn't always about doing something you're not supposed to do. A lot of the times it's about taking a different path to avoid something you don't want to do, right? To justify your lack of it. So what authorities are you paying attention to when you are listening for what is good for you, or what is the good? The second thing is, are you thinking beyond yourself, right? So when you're thinking about what's good for you, is it also good for those around you? Because in a social world where we live amongst other people, where we are in relationship and we have responsibility towards others, we have a responsibility to understand and think about what is best for everybody. And I would go so far as to say that, for me, is one of the core foundations of Christianity, is the ability to think beyond ourselves, to do good for the sake of the other as well as ourselves. And obviously, the maybe one of the fears that arises is that it's about sacrifice, that we need to harm ourselves or ignore our own well-being for the sake of others. And to be fair, some words from Jesus sometimes lend that direction, right? You must be willing to lay down your own life. You must be willing to pick up the cross and follow me. And yeah, okay, that's in there. But if we put those pieces in their proper contexts, and if we look at the entire witness of Scripture, by and large, Jesus isn't asking us to hurt ourselves to help others. Jesus is merely naming the severity or the significance of the consequences of what it means sometimes to go all the way in trying to help others. Is that so often when we do things for the sake, especially of those who are outcast or ostracized or marginalized, it makes us unpopular with those who are in power. Sometimes the same people who might be placing themselves as authorities, saying to us, well, no, we should not be helping those people. And again, what's their base interest? Is it simply because they're saying that because they want ultimately, they're only interested in their own well-being? So what authorities are you listening to? Is it good for those around you? And then finally, I think the piece that is most, for me, most true to the Christian experience is: are you taking the easy road or the hard road? Um, by and large, what Jesus seems to communicate, and this is, right in, is a very Lutheran theology. When we talk about, taking up the cross and following Christ, um, I think that, Jesus would say that doing what's good is hard. Um, if it's easy, you might need to reevaluate the things I previously mentioned, right? Is essentially that it requires work. Anybody that's tried to lose weight or give up potentially, addictive or abusive behavior would know that doing the right thing, doing the good thing, tends to take more work than falling to the temptation of doing the easy thing. One of the mantras that they say is that you can't out-exercise a bad diet, which is something I've always struggled with. Is I actually enjoy exercising, I enjoy running, I enjoy climbing, I enjoy hiking, walking, biking, whatever. But I like my food too, and so that's a piece that I've had to work on, and I could probably work on a little bit more as well. But yeah, is doing the right thing, doing the good thing, doing the thing that's good for you and good for others, and is, in some ways the ultimate good. It's the usually the path that requires the most work. It's the harder path. It's the path that requires commitment and perseverance and all of these things, which really fly in the face of temptation, right? They are the pieces that we work on over the course of our lifetimes, that don't just come easy to us. Most of us, anyways. There are some people who are graced with high metabolisms and natural discipline, things which I do not have in great volume. And ultimately, there's one more piece of this as well. So we've talked about, what does it mean to have our best interests in mind. When we talk about authorities, one of the pieces that we really do hold to be true, and it's evident in our Genesis text, but it's also evident in the Matthew text, is that we hold our God to be somebody who is always interested in our own personal well-being. God is interested solely in our good, and it's not the singular good; it's the plural good, but it includes the singular. God desires good for you and I. God desires and acts towards the thing that is good. Sometimes that might come or might fly in the face of our own assumptions or our own imaginings of what is good, but not all that often, believe it or not. And ultimately, I think that's the piece that we really need to put energy into and hold up, is naming that God ultimately is interested in the good for all of us. And should we find that that is not the case, that it's the good that is only for some, potentially at the expense of others, or it's the good that allows us to avoid responsibility or avoid doing the work, then we have to question whether or not we're actually listening to the voice of God. All right, I've gone on long enough, and one of the benefits of not having church on a Sunday morning should be that you don't have to sit and listen to me for an hour. So that being said, blessings to all of you. Stay warm, stay safe. Thank you, Macaron. Stay warm, stay safe. Try to do as well as you can on the roads as they are, and hope to see you soon in person, and to see as well as be seen. God's blessings. Happy week to all of you.